Hello, lovelies. You're listening to episode 42 of the Broken Enchantments podcast, written and read by Elizabeth Wheatley. That's me. I hope you enjoy this week's episode. Be sure to check out my Patreon for next week's episode, now available. You can check out the links below. Happy listening.
A quarter hour we've chased you. A quarter hour, Ceruleus snarled.
The other Argetallams sent in pursuit soon joined them, surrounding her and her guards from all sides.
Did anyone find the boy? Varsar asked. A brief silence gave the answer. That was some comfort. Leave him, Ceruleus growled, adjusting his grip on Janir. Mortana Drusilla gave us orders to kill him, someone pointed out. He's as good as dead in this city anyway. Varsar made a dismissive gesture. And he's unimportant. Come, men.
Cariel had gotten away. Janir should have been happy with that, but all she could think about was the punishment she would receive for this. The new wound on Ceruleus's brow had stopped bleeding, but it had formed a dark scab. If the first cut Janir had given him hadn't scarred, this one certainly would. Without pause or ceremony, they marched directly toward the palace. The closer they came, the more it sank in. Janir had been captured again, and this time there would be no escape. Seovan wouldn't be able to come for her. No one would. Varsar led the Argetallams and Janir to a small entrance into the palace, much like the one she had been ushered into the day she arrived at Saradin. They were granted entry after minimal questioning by the guards, and Varsar dismissed all the Argetallams except for Ceruleus and Canicade, whom he ordered to bring Janir. Once the others had gone their way, a nervous boy guided them through the polished stone halls and spotless galleries. Janir stumbled along between her captors, wanting to cry, but seeming to lack the energy. The Sultan's palace had been built out of coppery stone. Every inch of it had been buffed smooth as glass. They passed a garden with the sweet aroma of jasmine and unfamiliar flowers. The soft chirping of tamed songbirds came from inside. Saradin was nothing compared to this. Janir and her Argetallam captors rounded a corner, and the guiding servant stopped and stepped aside. Not missing a beat, the Argetallams continued. At the end, there was a pair of doors, made of heavy wood, guarded by an Argetallam on either side. They were dressed in full leather armor with black metal helmets. Metal plates curved around and covered most of the wearers' faces, reminding Janir of steel jawbones. From the other side, a blaze of magic flared into her awareness. Janir swallowed, not sure what to make of it. Varsar inclined his head in greeting, and the guards opened the way for him, pounding their fists against their chests in salute. Ceruleus and Canicade dragged Janir inside, and the doors thudded after them. They were in a massive gallery, giant pillars along either side, and a vaulted ceiling that seemed to float above them. The bases of the pillars were plated in gold, and a broad red carpet covered the floor between one row of columns to the next. A banner with the blazon of the Von Mars hung from every pillar. Aside from the wrought iron stands holding burning incense, there was no furniture of any sort. Gathered in the room was the Sultan along with his retinue of guards and servants. It took Janir a moment to realize who he was, but the embroidered robes and crown of rubies left no doubt. From the stories that Brevians told of him, she had expected either a ruthless warrior or a glutinous mass made of fat from the labors of his slaves. Yet Sultan Von Mar was uncomfortably human. He was a wisp of a man, not quite frail, yet long past his prime. He wore a thick gold chain, hanging a large, heavy gold disc, with the symbol of the sunburst, bent beneath the weight as if it were a shackle. There was a resignation and deflation to him that seemed more befitting to a defeated general than the ruler of the largest kingdom in the known world. Standing nearby was a man who appeared to be the Sultan's complete opposite. The second was in full armor, athletic, the bearing of a soldier about him with a few Argetallam Mortons as guards. The second man was as tanned as any of the Slavish, and no one would suspect his mother had been Brevian unless they saw his eyes. Janir shuddered and ducked her head, trying to avoid the gaze of the Lord Argetallam for as long as possible, even though his back was to her for the moment. The Lord Argetallam's guards didn't appear as tense as the Sultan's guards. They were almost relaxed. They didn't crowd their lord either, but instead spread out behind him. There were a few groups of Argetallams and Slavish nobles scattered in groups along the walls, but they seemed for the most part uninvolved in whatever was taking place in the center. 2 sword lengths or so to the Lord Argetallam's left stood Drusilla, out of her traveling clothes and in a dress with a hardened leather bodice and a flowing chiffon skirt. She turned on their entry, and Varsar nodded to her. Janir read total relief on Drusilla's face, and the Mortana leaned over and whispered something to the Lord Argetallam. He nodded once, but didn't so much as turn his head from the woman who spoke to the Sultan. The woman was Brevian. Her long auburn tresses fell below her waist in tended waves, her complexion alabaster and flawless, probably the work of magic. She had a swaying, graceful way of moving, as if dancing to a melody only she could hear. Her gown of blood-red silk shamelessly accentuated her curves. She didn't appear young, but she certainly didn't look old either. If Carlisle was a candle, this woman was a dozen lamps. Her magic shone like a hearth fire, burning strong. Now, it's quite clear you're afraid of me. Why else would you have insisted on meeting while the Lord Argetallam and his attendants were present? The woman asked. The Sultan was unruffled. The chalice is the Lord Argetallam's property. It would hardly be productive to make negotiations for its use without his approval. Even you must see that, Lady Zamarza. It took a moment, but Janir remembered where she had heard the name before. Zamarza, the enchantress of the 8th degree. Amilla and Cerilius had mentioned her back on the Crichton Road. Was Zamarza's only response. The enchantress was by all indication comfortable, even though there must have been 36 Argetallams in that room, not counting Janir. So the dwarves have built the road, and you can march your men across as soon as they have been spelled with the chalice. Zamarza brushed her hair behind her ear with a sensual motion. Pity your thugs didn't succeed in capturing the Brevian queen, but I suppose that's what you get for hiring locals. Her mood took an abrupt turn for the businesslike. I hope I have made myself clear. I want Lord Kayerson in exchange for my services. A shiver of fresh fear shot down Janir's spine. The witch woman wanted Armandius? Why? A Brevian high lord, laughed one of the Sultan's attendants, a young man who must have been a Vonmar in some way or other. What use would you have for him? She turned to the rash youth. I don't see how my personal business is any of yours. Enough, the Sultan said flatly, not looking at the youth. He made Janir think of a grandfather in that moment. A grandfather too exhausted to correct his unruly grandchild. If you're so powerful, why can't you get him yourself? The youth persisted. Zamarza didn't even flinch, but the youth was suddenly flung across the room and pinned motionless against the wall. She whirled around to face him. Do not mock me. Zamarza, the Sultan snapped. Let him go. Now. Janir thought she detected a hint of fear in the old ruler's command. Zamarza walked a short distance in the other direction. If you insist. The youth dropped to the ground, freed from the enchantment, gasping for breath and glaring at Zamarza's back while 2 servants rushed to help him up. I am more powerful than anyone any of you could name, Zamarza said confidently, once more including everyone in her statement. Zamarza kept turning, addressing everyone present, her alluring voice rising toward the ceiling like a song. The Chalice of Malvern is an ancient artifact, immensely powerful, highly dangerous. All of you know that you need my help. Janir knew who Malvern was. Practically everyone who had ever set foot inside a temple did. He was the essence of battle and war, created at the beginning to embody all that was violent and control it, but she knew nothing of any chalice. Silence suspended over the next few moments. The Lord Argetallam stepped toward Zamarza. You are telling us you want the diviner, the 7 swords, and Armandius Kayerson as the spoils of war? Those are your terms? Janir's heart lurched at the idea. Zamarza wanted the diviner and the 7 swords of Brevia in addition to Armandius. Why? The first 2 Janir could understand, but why, after demanding 8 invaluable and magical things, would Zamarza want 1 man? A High Lord, yes, but 1 man all the same. Zamarza faced the Lord Argetallam. Why? She asked, lowering her voice and moving closer until she was almost pressing against him. Is the bargain not... She reached up to finger his breastplate. Satisfying? You wish. The Lord Argetallam didn't move, gave no hint to indicate he felt anything at her boldness. Janir blushed. Was this considered normal diplomatic behavior? It could be pleasurable. Zamarza mischievously smirked. Just imagine. Oh, you have no idea, woman. Then the Lord Argetallam laughed at the enchantress. An amused, mocking, scornful sound. The silk of Zamarza's dress rustled as she stormed away from the Lord Argetallam. Perhaps she had never been so openly rejected. Considering that I am practically handing Brevia over to you permanently, free of casualties and the need for supplies, might I add, I don't think it's unreasonable at all. Zamarza pointed out. So it's settled then? When the snows melt, we will be in Valmaken. Agreed. Sultan Shara's capitulation was almost a groan. Agreed, the Lord Argetallam said flatly. Without another word, Zamarza turned, and with a faint stirring of the air was gone. The moment Zamarza disappeared, the Lord Argetallam uttered a few terse instructions to Drusilla before addressing the Sultan. Janir couldn't hear what they were saying, but she assumed that it was something to do with the war. The Sultan said something while shaking his head. The Lord Argetallam straightened and gave a hard reply. Stepping back, the Sultan pointed to his small entourage of advisors and heirs. This is your war, he said, raising his voice for them all to hear. Revenge, justice, conquest, call it what you will. I want no part in it. Our people want no part in it. One of the advisors said something Janir didn't catch. Another cut him off, and the Sultan simply shook his head again. Janir wasn't sure what was happening, but Drusilla was bearing down on her. The Mortana marched straight away to the 3 Argetallams who still held Janir captive. Morton Varser, you may leave. Morton Canacade? Morton Cerilius? To our quarters with the girl. With Drusilla leading them, Cerilius and Canacade took Janir back down a maze of halls and corridors. Both her guards kept a tight hold on her arms, though she had stopped fighting them a long time ago. Janir's mind swirled. First the Kryden Road, now Zamarza, this mysterious chalice of Mulvren. What other secrets of the Von Mars might there be? Worse, what secrets might the Argetallams hold? The 3 warriors took her to a large gallery, lavishly furnished with lamps. There were sanded doors leading from the gallery into private quarters, and the ubiquitous burning incense. Drusilla marched straight to one of the apartments and swung it open. Very good. Leave us, Drusilla commanded the Argetallams. They led Janir further into the apartment, and then Canacade let go of her, but Cerilius shoved her, more than a little vengefully. Janir didn't resist, and she stumbled before she caught herself. She slowly clambered back to her feet, head angled down. The country Janir considered to be her home, and the man she adored as her father were both in mortal danger, and there was nothing she could do to save either. The realization came with a wave of impotent anger. Have your head tended, Morton Cerilius, Drusilla suggested, pouring wine into 2 silver goblets on a low table. Cerilius grunted irritably and stalked out behind Canacade. Janir remained still, staring at the floor like she had done as a child when her brother had beaten her. They were in a sitting room with a crackling fire in the hearth. To the front of the room was a balcony that opened into a fine view of Sentirith. On the wall opposite the hearth, 2 doors led into what Janir guessed were private bedchambers. In the middle of the room, 2 couches were arranged to form a right angle, with one facing the fire and the other facing the apartment entrance. Drusilla sipped at her wine, then sighed. Why did you flee, Janir? Have we been all that cruel to you? Janir glanced up, then turned away. What good did your little escapade do you? It only served to get your friend killed. A jolt of panic shot through Janir's spine, but then she realized Drusilla hadn't had the chance to speak with Varser or any of the Argetallams before they had come here. She couldn't know anything about that. Janir didn't. My little escapade served me well, Janir countered, not able to meet Drusilla's gaze. It allowed my friend to get away. He got away, did he? So he left you? No, Janir swallowed. I hid him and left. Drusilla made a contemplative sound. I underestimated you, Janir. I honestly didn't expect you to be so self-sacrificial. It wasn't my original plan, Janir quietly admitted. I see. From the other side of the wall, a familiar voice dismissed his guards, and then the doors of the apartment swung wide. Janir couldn't think of what to do. Drusilla bowed in reverence. My lord? Janir found herself digging her fingernails into her palms, grinding her teeth urgently. Leave us, Drusilla, the Lord Argetallam commanded. I shall send for you later. As you wish, my lord. Drusilla bowed again, and made her way from the room. The Lord Argetallam came closer. Janir squeezed her eyes shut. Janir. The Lord Argetallam spoke her name with just the slightest hint of what could have been affection. Look at me, girl. Janir didn't dare disobey. Janir turned around, stiffly, fear paralyzing her bones. The Lord Argetallam gingerly lifted her chin. His eyes were just as she had remembered, like fog, cold, grey, and concealing. Whenever Janir met those eyes as a child, she felt like she was exposed, completely vulnerable. It was no different now. She went rigid, every muscle locking up with terror. The Lord Argetallam surveyed her face. It's a pity you didn't inherit your mother's beauty, though I doubt you would crack any mirrors. He released her and made his way to the couch, and a low table where Drusilla had poured the goblets. He picked up the one that was full. Janir didn't want to turn her back to him, so forced herself to face the man, pivoting rigidly in place. 8 years. That would mean you're a woman now. The Lord Argetallam calmly occupied the couch, very close to where Drusilla had been seated moments before. It was strange to hear someone call her a woman, though it was true. She still didn't consider herself one. She still thought of herself as just a girl. Maybe not a child anymore, but not quite a woman either. 8 years. A very long time indeed, especially for one as young as you. The Lord Argetallam didn't take his eyes off her. I fear that the Brevians have had plenty of time to turn you against me. Janir tried to keep still. So long as she didn't move, she wouldn't tremble. I'm sure they have told you more than enough lies of the great misdeeds the Argetallams have committed, and our general depravity as a race, yes? The Lord Argetallam sharply inquired. Yes. Yes, Janir quietly answered. And do you believe them? The Lord Argetallam pressed, his voice like ice. His intent attention made her think of the hypnotic stare of a snake before striking prey. Answer. Janir gulped. Lying was of no use now. Some of it. Do you believe the Brevians are truly better people than us? Janir drew a deep breath. A person can be good. People are not. Most of the good people she knew just happened to be Brevian. How interesting. Do you believe you could ever put aside your life in Brevia and Armandius Caerson? Don't look so surprised. Of course I know all about your foster father. Then you know he's a good man, Janir said. Perhaps. But if you're trying to say he's better than me, you deceive yourself, Janir. Indignation gave her the small burst of courage she needed. You've tortured people. You believe Caerson hasn't, he retorted. Janir bit her lip. Still, she felt a little spark of anger. Who are you to accuse him after what you did to my mother? And what do you think I did to your mother, exactly? He took another sip from his goblet. Janir felt her courage deserting her, but she managed to reply without quivering. She would have never been with another man willingly. Did your mother tell you this? Janir swallowed.
She didn't have to. The Lord Argetallam's careful control splintered in a snarl. I have never... He swallowed a gulp of wine with the rest of his sentence. He paused, and all emotion seemed to melt from him. Well then, my daughter. He said the word daughter with just the right amount of emphasis to remind her who she was. I suppose we shall have quite a bit to discuss on our journey home. Surely you haven't forgotten Adasha? It wasn't a question. Janir did remember Adasha, the citadel of the Argetallams, with its white soaring spires and massive white walls looking out over the churning surf of the sea. At twilight, the stone city would be bathed in a rich pinkish-orange glow, turned the color of the fading sun itself. Janir's mother had told her the stories of elves, enchantments, and magical creatures many times while they had sat somewhere quiet in the late afternoons. Then there were all the days she had spent in fear of the Lord Argetallam and her only slightly younger brother, and suddenly the splendor and majesty of Adasha didn't seem worth the price. The Lord Argetallam set down his goblet. I am most interested in one subject in particular. Are you aware of your duties to Argetallam kind? Janir didn't consider herself to have any obligations. She turned her gaze to the side, away from her father. I don't belong to them. No. Lord Argetallam rose deliberately and stepped toward her. Janir tensed, not knowing what to expect, only that his reaction would not be a kind one. She dug her fingers into her palms until they moistened with blood. The Lord Argetallam stopped, not a sword length away, and stood there. He waited, letting Janir agonize in uncertainty before he made his next move. He grabbed her by the throat and jerked her around to face him. Janir yelped, but didn't fight. Fear sent her into compliance. You are wrong, Janir. The Lord Argetallam pulled her closer and hissed in her ear. You belong to the race of Argetallam, just as I do. That tether is a greater bondage than your Brevian foster father can even dream. Shoving her, he sent Janir to the ground. When she dared steal a glance up, there was disappointment clear on his face. At length, he spoke again. I had hoped it would not come to this, I truly did. But you are too tainted for there to be any other way. Janir tensed, every muscle as taut as a harp string. He was going to kill her. She should have expected this. I am not going to kill you, Janir, the Lord Argetallam calmly stated, as if he had read her thoughts. I am, however, going to make sure that you fulfill your duty to the race of Argetallam.
You have been listening to Broken Enchantments, written and read by Elizabeth Wheatley. Don't forget to check out my Patreon for early access to episodes, bonus content, and lots of patrons-only freebies. You can learn more at elizabethwheatley.com. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube. I'll see you next time.